The Cold War wasn't just a clash of ideas, it was actually a trillion-dollar power game. Both the United States and the Soviet Union used money, credit, and secret trade networks to control the world. So behind every missile and every leader's speech there was a balance sheet, in other words, money acting as the hidden subject, and behind every enemy figure there was a transaction. When World War II ended, it was said that the world was divided into two, but was it really? On one side you had the capitalist West led by the US, and on the other side the communist East led by the Soviet Union. Two opposing ideologies, two different visions of the future. But while politicians talked about freedom and equality, economists had already revealed how dependent the two sides actually were on each other. The US didn't just win the war, it also ended up with most of the world's gold. By 1945, nearly two-thirds of it was sitting in Fort Knox, and that gold and the dollar tied to it became the foundation of the new global financial system. With the Bretton Woods Agreement, the dollar was pegged to gold and the whole world had no choice but to trust it. In other words, countries could no longer trade without dollars. With a single agreement, the US essentially took control of the world's monetary system. In the East, Stalin was building his own financial fortress. The Soviets tried to create a self-sufficient system that didn't rely on gold or the dollar, but they still needed foreign currency to buy technology, food, and machinery. So even though they looked like enemies, money tied them together. In the 1950s, Soviet oil was secretly sold to the West via Finland, Austria, and Switzerland, all in exchange for dollars. Western companies got cheap energy and the Soviets got hard currency. Everyone was running propaganda, but the truth was simple: money was doing the talking. Meanwhile, the CIA and the KGB were both playing their own double games. The CIA financed coups using shell companies and offshore accounts and ran massive propaganda campaigns. The KGB funneled rubles into Western banks via fake trading companies and neutral countries. The goal wasn't to make money, it was to gain access to technology and influence. By the 1960s, the dollar was circulating not just in America but in offshore accounts in London. The ironic part? The US banking system was designed to isolate communism, yet it was indirectly helping to finance the Soviets. American corporations were also making moves behind the scenes. Companies like IBM, Pepsi, and Chase Manhattan didn't care about politics, they cared about access. David Rockefeller went to Moscow, praised Soviet stability, and his bank funded Soviet industrial projects. The media presented this as diplomacy, but it was really about money and power. The moral struggle of the Cold War was the part shown on stage. But behind the curtain it was more like a joint venture. Each side benefited from the other's existence. The arms race, constant fear, and political tension kept the economy alive. Trillions of dollars were spent on weapons and technology, yet no one dared to actually use them. In 1971, Nixon ended the gold standard and the dollar became a freely floating currency. This meant the US could print as much money as it wanted and fund its power indefinitely. The petrodollar era began. From now on, every country needed dollars to buy energy. Oil became the blood of the global economy, the dollar became its heart. The Soviets also took advantage of this. The oil shocks of the 1970s crippled the West, while the USSR enjoyed huge revenues and used that money to buy credit and technology. Publicly, they criticized capitalism, but privately they depended on it. The US and the Soviets financed global conflicts through proxy wars. Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia were the real battlegrounds. Coups, civil wars, revolutions, all of them were essentially financial transactions. The Contras, the Mujahideen, the Sandinistas, each one was just another number in someone's ledger. The truth behind the Cold War wasn't ideology, it was money flow. Banks were always one step ahead. Swiss banks moved Soviet and CIA funds side by side. London's Eurodollar market became the perfect hiding place for both capitalist profits and communist debts. When the Berlin Wall fell, people thought history had ended. But it didn't end, it turned into money. Soviet wealth didn't disappear, it just changed flags. The oligarchs didn't suddenly become billionaires, they simply became visible. The Cold War ended where it began, on a ledger. And today's battles over money, energy, and cyberspace are just digital versions of the same old game. Because power never cared about ideology, it cared about liquidity. So the next time countries fight over money, energy, or influence, remember this: they've been playing the same game since 1945. The only thing that changed is the interface. There used to be the Iron Curtain, now there's the internet, and behind the scenes the same people are still counting the profits. Because what matters isn't the flags. It's the flow of money.